Good evening, I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Here are our top stories tonight. What is next for Malaysia in our negotiations with the US on tariffs? And we look at the Singapore election results and what it means for the country. More on this coming up on AWANI International. We start AWANI International tonight with a timeline of Trump 2.0 tariff, just to give an overview of how this began and how it compared to the US President's first term back in 2016. President Trump's second term economic doctrine is here. It's bigger, bolder, and riskier. It began on February 1st. A 25% tariff slammed into all goods from Canada and Mexico, though Canada's energy sector caught a softer 10%. China wasn't spared either. A 10% levy returned, but that was just the beginning. By February 10th, steel and aluminium tariffs were back, tougher than ever. Aluminium doubled from 10 to 25%. Steel locked in at 25%. Then, a temporary reprieve. On March 6, USMCA allies were granted a 30-day delay. Some automotive and agricultural goods got a pass, but only until April 2nd, the Liberation Day. Now, March 26 delivered another shock. 25% tariffs on all imported cars, trucks, and auto parts. Unless it's made in the US, expect to pay more. Then came the reciprocal tariffs, and it took effect on most imports. But here's the kicker. Countries with big trade surpluses now face tariffs up to 50%. However, a slight breather came April 9th. Tariffs above 10% were paused for 90 days, but the clock is ticking. On July 9th, higher tariffs snapped back into place. Malaysia, for example, avoids a 24% tariff for now. And in a selective carve-out, April 12th brought just some relief. Smartphones, laptops, semiconductors spared from tariffs. It's a nod to tech supply chains and perhaps Silicon Valley politics. Now, we go to the next slide, where in 2018 to 2019, only 425 billion US dollars worth of goods were taxed. Trump 2.0, over 1.6 trillion. That's more than half of all US imports. The scope expanded from 12,600 to 17,600 product categories. Now, this tariff regime is 3.5 times bigger. More sectors, more pain, and global fallout. And Southeast Asia is directly in the crosshairs. ASEAN exports 352.3 billion US dollars worth of goods to the US, and that's over 10% of America's entire import volume. Vietnam, of course, leads with 136.6 billion. Thailand follows with 63.3 billion. Malaysia alone sends 52.5 billion to the US, and Singapore rounds out the top four at 43.2 billion US dollars. But with the reciprocal tariff mechanism, that trade is now vulnerable, especially after July 9th. It's a geopolitical signal that the US is no longer afraid to weaponize access to its market. For ASEAN, the message is clear: diversify or pay the price. The tariff clock is ticking, and July 9th may even bring a harsher reality. Now, of course, this brings us to our focus tonight, the special parliamentary sitting to address US tariffs held today. There are a number of news headlines emerging from this session, but the most critical one is this: US agrees to further talks on imports from Malaysia, says Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Now, although discussions are currently in the early stages, according to him, Anwar says there is a likelihood that the US will reduce the 24% reciprocal tariff imposed on Malaysia. However, he reiterated that the process is still in the early stages without any agreement finalized by the two parties. He also said that all ongoing discussions are subject to a non-disclosure agreement in line with international practices when the issues are of strategic interest and are sensitive. Other than that, the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, or MITI, also announced that it will be the sole issuer of non-preferential certificates of origin, or NPCO, for exports to the United States from tomorrow, May 6, 2025. Now, in a statement, the ministry said the government views any attempt to circumvent tariff through wrong or false declaration, whether related to the value or origin of goods, as a serious offence. This is carried out to address the issue of possible transshipments from certain countries to the US market, though Malaysia's entry and exit points. Now, after the break, we explore what is next for Malaysia with regards to the US tariffs. Stay tuned.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada. Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Now we would like to make sense of all the issues raised in this special sitting in Dewan Rakyat. And with us tonight is Sharmila Sunterasegaran, Assistant Manager of the Research for the Economics and Business Unit of Ideas. Thank you so much, Sharmila, for being with us. What do you make of the issues raised in this special sitting?
Yeah, I think firstly, I do want to mention that the special sitting session itself and having this discussion in Parliament, it does show that the government is serious about managing the impact of these tariffs. And I don't think the emphasis is so much on the short-term measures, but more on laying out Malaysia's broader position and to reinforce for investors and also the public confidence. There was also a clear signal that Malaysia is not planning to escalate or retaliate. I think instead it's focusing more on protecting the export competitiveness and also sending the right message to investors. I think that's a good sign given all the uncertainties that are going on globally.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister has also announced during this sitting a 1 billion ringgit financial guarantee and 500 million ringgit in soft loans just to support the SMEs. Now, in your view, will this be enough to offset the impact of the 24% US tariff, especially for export-reliant sectors?
Yeah, I think the 1.5 billion SME support package is important, especially since smaller firms are the ones that are going to be most exposed to rising input costs and also tariff-related uncertainty, especially since they are operating on relatively thin profit margins. But I think the more important point would be how these are dispersed and how targeting is happening to the right segments, particularly the export-facing SMEs. I think that would really determine the impact rather than just the amount itself.
I see. So there is this suggestion by Bagan MP Lim Guan Eng, who has called for a freeze on all cost-increasing policies. Then this includes tax hikes and the flotation of RON 95. It's a very controversial topic. How viable is this suggestion in balancing fiscal responsibility with industrial competitiveness?
Yeah, I think on freezing cost increasing policies, I think the concern there is understandable, especially as I mentioned, smaller businesses operating on tight margins. I think these sudden increases in fuel and also utility prices can really hurt operational stability. But that said, I think these structural reforms like the fuel subsidy rationalization are something that is necessary to create long-term fiscal space. Again, I think the rollout is what matters. If it's not done carefully, I think these reforms could be destructive. So I think rather than freezing policies altogether, I think what is needed is a more transparent and phased approach with clear communication. I think businesses should be given the visibility on the timing, also the mechanism, so that they can plan accordingly and it's not blindsided, especially with all the uncertainties that are going on globally. So I think transparency will be the way to reduce market anxiety rather than removing these policies altogether.
Thank you so much, Sharmila, for your insights. That was Sharmila Sunterasegaran. She's the Assistant Manager of Research for the Economics and Business Unit for Ideas. And now we move on to the next stories. Other than looking at the US, we are also keeping a close eye on our neighbors. The The People's Action Party, or PAP, has kept its stronghold on power, winning big in Saturday's general election and continuing its unbroken 66-year rule. Despite signs of rising voter discontent with the PAP's tight control, the party still managed to win all but 10 seats in parliament, a clear sign that it remains firmly in charge. According to Eugene Tan Keng Boon of Singapore Management University, this suggests that voters continue to value stability and continuity in an increasingly uncertain world.
Well, the Workers' Party certainly ran a very effective campaign. They certainly capture, the hearts and minds of Singaporeans when they spoke about the need to develop a more balanced political system. But voters also recognize that, in the midst of the international order being upended, that this was perhaps, an important time to signal that there had to be a vote for continuity, for stability, for security. And I think when you look at the outcome of the general election, right, PM Wong getting the mandate that he sought, the opposition party, essentially the Workers' Party, maintaining, their grip on the seats that they won the last time. I think that, to me, also demonstrated that this was an outcome that is a victory for both Singapore and Singaporeans, because it demonstrated, that it is possible to give the Prime Minister the mandate he sought, but also to continue ensuring, that Singapore's democratic development, will not be stymied in any way.
The People's Action Party, or PAP's victory, comes amid concern over the possible consequences of US President Donald Trump's trade policies and their impact on Singapore's economy. Now, can Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and his team rise to the challenge ahead? Here's what Eugene has to say.
So they have their work cut out for them. And I think that means, Prime Minister Wong, having to reach out, to like-minded countries, such as Malaysia, as well as other ASEAN member states, as well as other important trading partners, like Japan, Korea, and China, to try to ensure that this international trading system will continue to ensure that there will be free trade and investment flows across countries. So I think, this is where I think Prime Minister Wong would have to show, that Singapore is able to rally other like-minded countries, to ensure that, the global order continues to be vibrant and allow countries to thrive. But that also means, reaching out to the United States and trying to perhaps, make a case, why the ongoing tariffs war, would not only be disadvantageous to the US, but also to the world at large.
US President Donald Trump has announced plans to impose 100% tariffs on movies made in foreign countries, escalating his global trade disputes to the realm of entertainment as well. Trump says he's directing the Department of Commerce and the US Trade Representative to begin the process, claiming the American film industry is dying a very fast death.
He blamed foreign governments for offering incentives to lure filmmakers overseas, calling it a national security threat. However, key details remain unclear. Trump's statement did not specify whether the tariff would affect US companies that film abroad. It's also uncertain if the tariffs would apply to streaming platforms like Netflix, as well as those shown at cinemas, or how they would be calculated. Several recent major US studio productions like Deadpool and Wolverine, Wicked, and Gladiator 2 were filmed outside the US. Trump had in January called for overhaul of the Hollywood, appointing actors Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, and Jon Voight as special ambassadors to help revive the industry and bring film production back to the US.
That report wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more. Be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. That is all for now. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Good night.